Every morning I woke up at 6. I made a cup of coffee, checked my phone, and looked through emails that could have waited until later. My husband, Mark, was usually still asleep, and my children were already too grown to need my help in the mornings. Our house was quiet, clean, and filled with everything that looked like success. We had 2 cars, a smart refrigerator, white walls, and a little garden that never looked wild. From the outside, it looked like a dream. From the inside, it felt like a plan I had never made. I worked as a real estate manager in a company that sold modern apartments to young families. People called me professional and friendly. My office was full of light and glass, and I smiled in every meeting. But sometimes, when the meetings ended and everyone went back to their computers, I stared at the window and asked myself a question I never answered. Is this really my life? When I was a teenager, I dreamed of traveling, painting, and maybe living near the sea. I wanted to do something that felt alive, something that made me excited to wake up. But life had other plans. I studied business because it was safe, married Mark because everyone said he was a good man, and moved to the suburbs because it was what successful families did. Years passed, and I followed the same path every woman around me followed. It felt easy at first, but slowly it began to feel like I was walking inside a dream someone else had written. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more every week. Every day in my company was the same rhythm: calls, papers, contracts, small talks, lunch, and more calls. I was good at it, maybe even great, but there was no joy in being great at something I did not love. I smiled a lot because that was part of the job. Clients loved confidence, and I had learned to wear it like perfume. Sometimes I looked at the young women in the office, full of new energy and dreams, and I wondered if they could already see the walls waiting for them too. At home, everything looked perfect. Mark had a stable job in finance. Our daughter Emily was at university studying medicine. Our son Tom was finishing high school. We had dinners together, but often they were silent. Everyone was on their phones or tired from the day. Mark liked watching news and numbers, and I liked pretending everything was fine. On weekends, we met friends, smiled, and talked about vacations, prices of houses, and new electric cars. It was the language of people who did not know how to talk about feelings anymore. One Friday evening, after a company dinner, I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. The parking lot was empty. The lights above made everything look silver and cold. I felt strange, like a guest in my own life. I thought about how everyone at the dinner talked about success, new houses, and luxury. But nobody mentioned happiness. Nobody looked truly alive. We were all smiling with tired eyes, repeating the same words because silence was uncomfortable. I drove home slowly. When I entered the house, Mark was asleep on the sofa, with the television still on. A news reporter was speaking about the economy. I turned it off and looked around the living room. The furniture was clean and beautiful, but there was no warmth. I walked to the kitchen, poured some water, and stared at my reflection in the glass door. I looked like someone I knew, but not someone I remembered becoming. The next morning, I went for a walk around our neighborhood. The houses all looked the same: perfect lawns, perfect cars, perfect lives. A woman waved at me from across the street. Her name was Lisa, and she often talked about how busy she was, how her husband never had time for her, and how her daughter wanted to be an artist, but she wished she would study law. Her words were polite, but her eyes were tired. I smiled and waved back. I knew her life was probably as lonely as mine. I stopped near a small park and sat on a bench. There were children playing, and their laughter made the air feel lighter. I remembered when Emily and Tom were small, when our weekends were full of noise and questions and paint on the walls. Life felt messy but alive then. I missed that. Now everything was organized and safe, but also empty. Later that day, while cleaning the kitchen, I found an old notebook inside a drawer. It was from my university days. I opened it and saw my handwriting. It was full of ideas for stories, little drawings, and dreams about traveling. There was a list titled, "Things I Want to Do Before I'm 30. I smiled sadly because I had done almost none of them. Instead, I had built a life full of things I thought I was supposed to want. It was a strange moment, like meeting the young version of myself and realizing how far I had walked from her. That night, I could not sleep. I lay next to Mark and listened to his breathing. I wondered if he ever felt the same emptiness. Maybe he did. He did, but he never said it. Maybe we were both actors playing our parts, afraid to stop because we did not know what would come next. I thought about the notebook again and the way it made me feel alive for a short moment. I wanted that feeling again. The following week, I did something I had not done in years. I took a day off. I told everyone at work that I was feeling sick. It was not true, but maybe in another way, it was. I was not sick in body, but my heart felt tired. I took my car and drove to the seaside, about an hour away. The sky was gray and the water was calm. I walked along the beach in my office shoes, holding them in my hands after a while. The cold sand felt real under my feet, more real than anything in a long time. I breathed deeply, and for a moment I did not feel like a manager or a wife or a mother. I felt like a person again. I sat by the water for hours, watching the waves and small birds. Nobody called me. Nobody asked me for anything. It was quiet and beautiful. I realized that I had forgotten how silence could feel peaceful, not empty. When I finally looked at my phone, I had 10 missed calls from the office and 2 from Mark. I turned it off. I was not ready to go back yet. When I drove home that evening, I expected to feel guilty, but I did not. Instead, I felt something else, like I had taken one small step towards something honest. I did not know what that something was yet. I only knew that for the first time in many years, I had done something for myself. That night, when Mark asked how my day was, I said it was fine. I wanted to tell him about the sea, about the sand and the sky, but I stayed quiet. He would not understand. Maybe he was not ready to understand. I was not sure if I was either, but deep inside, I knew that something had started to change. It was small and quiet, like a secret seed under the ground, waiting for light. I went to bed late and opened the notebook again. I read the line I had written many years ago. One day I will find a life that feels like mine. I closed it and smiled softly. Maybe that day was not far anymore. Before I continue with this story, please dislike, subscribe, share, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now let's continue. When I woke up the next morning, the feeling from the sea was still with me. It stayed quiet but strong, like a small light inside me. The air in my house felt heavy again, but something had changed in how I saw it. The same walls, the same rooms, but now I could see how much of my life was built to please others. For years I had been trying to be perfect, not happy. That morning I decided to stop pretending that everything was fine. At breakfast, Mark talked about a new project at work. He sounded proud but tired. I listened, nodded, and smiled, but my mind was somewhere else. I thought about the waves and the sound of the sea. He asked if something was wrong, and I said I was only a little tired. It was easier than telling the truth. I was not ready to share the truth yet, because I did not know how to explain it. How could I say that I loved my family but not my life? When I arrived at the office, the usual noise and rhythm returned. The phones rang, people walked quickly, and the smell of coffee filled the air. Everything was exactly as it had been the day before, but I looked at it differently. The faces around me looked busy but empty. I realized I was one of them, running from one task to another, trying to stay useful. For years, I thought success meant being needed, but now I saw how being needed could also become a kind of prison. During lunch, my coworker, Sarah, sat next to me. She talked about her husband, her house, and her plans for another family vacation. Her words felt like a mirror of my own life. I smiled and asked questions, but my thoughts were far away. I wanted to tell her that sometimes comfort can feel like a cage, but she would not understand. She believed, as I once did, that stability means happiness. When she asked if I was joining the weekend company retreat, I said yes automatically, although the idea of spending another weekend talking about goals made my stomach feel tight. That afternoon, I went to visit a new apartment we were trying to sell. It was modern, quiet, and full of light. The young couple who came to see it held hands and looked excited. They talked about where they would put their books, their plants, and their future. I smiled and explained the details, but watching them made me sad. They still believed that a perfect home meant a perfect life. I wanted to tell them that one day they might wake up and not know who they had become. But of course, I could not say that. My job was to sell dreams, not truth. In the evening, I drove home slowly again. The road was full of cars, each one carrying someone tired from the day. At a red light, I looked around and saw faces behind glass, all staring forward, waiting to move. Everyone looked serious, silent, and alone. I wondered if any of them felt like I did, half alive, half missing. When the light turned green, I kept driving, but the thought stayed with me. Maybe we were all pretending, keeping the same rhythm so we did not have to face what was missing. That night, after dinner, I opened my old notebook again. I wrote one new sentence: I want to feel alive again. It looked small on the page, but it felt brave. I did not know how to start, but I knew I could not stay the same. The next morning, I made a list. Not a big one, only 3 small things. First, do something I enjoy every day. Second, say no when I want to. Third, remember that I do not have to be perfect. It was a quiet promise to myself. The first thing I did was join a small painting class in the city. It was held in a bright studio above a cafe. The teacher was an older woman with kind eyes, and the other students were people like me, adults trying to remember what joy felt like. When I touched the brush and saw the colors mix on the paper, something inside me opened. My hands moved slowly, my mind was calm, and for the first time in years, I was not thinking about emails or sales. I was simply there, present, breathing. It felt like meeting a part of myself I had lost a long time ago. After that first class, I walked home with paint on my fingers and a small smile on my face. It was strange how something so simple could make me feel lighter. I wanted to tell Mark about it, but when I got home, he was busy reading the news. I said I joined a class, and he said that was nice, without looking up. I wanted to feel angry, but I could not. Maybe he was also lost in his own world, just like I had been. Maybe we were two people living side by side, both pretending everything was fine. In the next weeks, painting became my secret joy. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I went to the class. I painted small things at first, a cup, a window, a tree. Then I started painting people, faces that looked a little like mine, a little like strangers. Each color felt like a word I had been afraid to say. I was quiet in class, but inside, I was talking to myself in a language I had forgotten. At work, nothing had changed on the outside, but inside, I began to care less about things that once ruled my days. I stopped checking my phone during lunch. I took short walks instead of sitting at my desk. My coworkers noticed something was different. Sarah said I looked happier. I smiled and said I was fine, but I knew it was more than fine. It was a beginning. Then one morning, my boss called me into his office. He talked about a new opportunity, a chance to lead a bigger team in another city. He said it was an honor, a sign of trust. I was supposed to feel proud, but I did not. I felt afraid that saying yes would take me further from the person I was starting to find again. He asked if I needed time to think, and I said yes. That night, I told Mark about the offer. He looked excited. He said it was a great step for me, that it would bring more money, more respect. But when I said I was not sure, his smile faded. He asked if something was wrong with me, if I was tired of working. I said no, but he did not believe me. He said I was being emotional and that I should not waste such an opportunity. I did not answer. It was strange how his words made me feel smaller, like I was a child again asking for permission to live. After he went to bed, I sat in the kitchen alone. I looked at the empty cups, the clean table, and the quiet house. I thought about how much of my life was about keeping things in order, keeping people comfortable, keeping peace. I wondered what would happen if I stopped. Maybe everyone would be angry, but maybe for the first time, I would be free. The next morning, I went to the sea again, the same place as before. The sky was blue this time, and the air was warmer. I stood there and closed my eyes. I remembered the girl who wrote in the old notebook, the woman who smiled in meetings, and the person who painted in silence. I realized they were all me. I had been searching for a life that felt real, and I was finally learning what that meant. It was not about leaving everything. It was about being honest with myself. When I got back home, I opened my notebook again and wrote, "I do not want to be perfect. I want to be real." Then I called my boss and said I would not take the new position. My voice was calm and my heart was steady. When I hung up, I felt light, almost happy. It was not a big change to the world, but it was a big change for me. That evening, Mark looked surprised when I told him. He said I was making a mistake, but I did not argue. I simply said I wanted something different. For the first time in years, I spoke without fear. I did not know what would happen next, but I knew I could no longer live a life built only to look good from the outside. I wanted to build one that felt true inside. That night, I slept deeply. My dreams were full of color, sound, and open air. When I woke up, I felt ready for something new, even if I did not yet know what that would be. The days after I refused the promotion felt quiet but different. I thought I would feel afraid or guilty, but I did not. Instead, there was a calm space in my mind. I still went to work every day, still spoke to clients and sent reports, but something inside me had changed. I no longer saw my job as the center of my life. It was only one part of me, not the whole story. At home, Mark was polite but distant. I could feel his disappointment even when he did not say anything. He left early and came home late, often with tired eyes. We ate dinner together, but the silence between us was heavier now. I knew he did not understand why I had turned down the offer. For him, success was clear and simple. A better job meant a better life. I wanted to tell him that I needed something more than better. I needed something real. But I stayed quiet. I had spoken enough for now. One evening, my daughter Emily called from the university. She wanted to come home for the weekend. When she arrived on Friday night, I felt an old happiness returning. We cooked together, something we had not done in a long time. While cutting vegetables, she looked at me and said I seemed different. I asked what she meant, and she said I looked lighter, calmer. I smiled and said maybe I was learning how to breathe again. She laughed and said that sounded like something she needed too. After dinner, we sat on the sofa with tea. Emily talked about her studies, about how difficult medical school was, and about her doubt if she had chosen the right path. She said everyone expected her to be perfect, but sometimes she wanted to stop and rest. I listened quietly. Her words touched something deep in me because they sounded so much like my own thoughts. I told her that being perfect is not the same as being happy. She looked surprised at first, then smiled slowly. She said she was glad to hear that from me because she had always thought I wanted perfection from everyone, including her. That night we talked for hours, not as mother and daughter, but as two women trying to understand life. The next morning, I woke early and went for a walk. The sky was pink and gold, and the air smelled of spring. I passed by houses that still looked perfect, but now I saw them differently. They were not signs of success anymore. They were only buildings. What mattered was the life inside them. I thought about how long I had lived as if my home, job, and family picture were proofs of happiness. But happiness cannot be shown. It can only be felt. That simple truth was something I had learned too late, but I was grateful to have learned it at all. When I came back, Mark was reading the newspaper. He asked where I had gone, and I said for a walk. He nodded without looking up. I wanted to talk to him about how I felt, but his silence built a wall between us. We had grown used to speaking only about practical things, not about emotions, but that morning I decided to try. I sat down and told him that I felt lost for a long time and that I needed to change. He looked at me, unsure what to say. I told him I still cared about him, but I could not keep living like a stranger in my own life. His face softened a little. He said he did not understand everything, but that he would try. It was not much, but it was something. Over the next weeks, I continued my painting classes. I started helping my teacher with small exhibitions in local cafes. One day she asked if I wanted to show my own paintings. At first, I said no, because I did not think they were good enough. But later, I thought about how I had always stopped myself with that same thought, so I said yes. It would be my first small show, nothing big, only 10 paintings. Still, it felt like a mountain to climb. I worked on them every evening after work. I painted women sitting by windows, women walking alone, women looking into mirrors. Each painting felt like another part of my heart, finding its way out. The night of the exhibition came. The cafe was full of warm light and soft music. My hands were shaking when I arrived. I looked at my paintings on the wall and felt a strange pride mixed with fear. People walked around, looked, and smiled. Some asked about the meaning, and I told them simple truths. I said each picture was about learning to see yourself again. Mark came too. He stood quietly, looking at one painting for a long time. Then he said it was beautiful. That single word meant more than I could explain. Emily also came. She hugged me and said she was proud. For the first time, I felt that my family saw me not only as a mother or wife, but as a person. After that evening, something opened between us. We began to talk more. Not about work or money, but about life. Emily shared her small fears, and I shared mine. Even Mark started to ask about my art classes. Sometimes he would sit with me while I painted. He never said much, but I could feel a quiet curiosity in him. It was as if he was watching me to understand how I had changed and wondering if he could change too. At work, my decision not to take the promotion became old news. A younger manager got the role, and people stopped talking about it. I still did my job well, but I no longer lived for it. I learned to leave my laptop at the office and let my evenings belong to me. Some of my coworkers thought I had lost ambition, but I knew I had found balance instead. I was learning to choose peace over pressure, truth over perfection. One Sunday afternoon, I drove back to the sea. This time, I brought my painting things with me. The sky was clear, and the sound of the waves was soft. I sat near the water and began to paint. I did not plan anything. I only followed what I felt. The picture became a woman standing alone on the beach, holding her shoes in her hand, looking at the horizon. Her face was calm. When I finished, I realized the woman was me. I smiled quietly, feeling the wind on my face. The sea had become my mirror, and I finally liked what I saw. When I came home, I hung the painting in our living room. It was bright and simple, but it meant everything. Emily saw it first and said it looked peaceful. Mark said it made the room feel more alive. I looked at it every morning after that as a reminder that change was possible. It was proof that even after years of pretending, a person could still find her way back to herself. Months passed. My days were still full of work, family, and small problems, but they no longer felt heavy. I began to enjoy simple things again. A quiet morning coffee, a walk after dinner, a good book. I was still the same woman in many ways, but the difference was inside. I had stopped living for what people expected. I had started to live for what made sense to me. Sometimes I still felt the old emptiness trying to return. It came quietly, like a shadow. But now I knew how to face it. I would take out my paints or go for a walk by the sea. I learned that emptiness is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is a reminder that something important needs attention. It taught me to listen to myself before everything became too quiet again. One evening, Emily called from the city. She said she had changed her field of study. She wanted to work in art therapy. She told me that watching me rediscover myself helped her believe she could do the same. I cried after the call, not from sadness but from gratitude. It felt like something had come full circle. My change had become a bridge for her to cross into her own truth. Now, when I look at my life, it is not perfect. There are still days when I feel tired or unsure, but it feels real. The air in my house feels warmer, and even silence no longer feels empty. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I sit near the painting in the living room and think about how far I have come. The woman I used to be would not recognize me now, and that makes me smile. I used to believe that success was measured by what others could see. Now I know that success is when you can look at your own reflection and feel peace. I do not know what will happen next, but I finally trust myself to find out. I once had a perfect life I never wanted, but now I have an imperfect one that finally feels like mine. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.